The Drakhreth descended upon Earth like a storm, their massive ships blotting out the skies. These conquerors had spread terror across countless worlds, their advanced technology crushing resistance with ease. To them, Earth was nothing more than another insignificant planet to dominate. The first wave of their attack was swift and brutal, striking major cities and key infrastructures without warning. Their weapons melted steel and concrete as if they were paper, leaving humanity scrambling in the face of overwhelming power. The global response was chaotic. Nations united under a single banner for the first time in history, pooling their resources and military might. But even the most advanced human weapons were like toys against the Drakhreth's shields. Fighter jets were swatted from the sky, tanks were reduced to smoldering husks, and infantry units were annihilated before they could even see their enemy. The Drakhreth laughed at humanity's efforts, mocking their primitive technology and fragile bodies. Earth's leaders convened in a desperate summit, their faces pale with fear and exhaustion. Every traditional tactic had failed, and the alien invaders were closing in on total domination. Morale was at an all-time low. Civilians huddled in underground shelters, their hope dwindling with each passing day. The Drakhreth broadcasted their demands for surrender, offering humanity the chance to serve as laborers in their sprawling empire. But even in the face of despair, Earth's leaders refused to bow. They knew surrender would mean the end of humanity's freedom and spirit. Amid the chaos, a group of unconventional thinkers proposed an idea so absurd that it was initially dismissed outright. They suggested sending individuals deemed unfit for traditional combat to confront the invaders. These were people who, for various reasons, had been excluded from military service. Pacifists, those recovering from injuries, intellectuals, and even volunteers with no combat experience. The plan was simple and unorthodox: play to the aliens' expectations and exploit their overconfidence. The proposal was met with skepticism and outrage. How could the weakest among them stand against a species that had conquered entire star systems? But as the situation grew more desperate, the idea began to gain traction. Earth had nothing to lose. If brute force couldn't win the war, perhaps it was time to try something completely unexpected. The chosen group was an eclectic mix of individuals. There was a retired teacher with a knack for storytelling, a former engineer who specialized in improvisation, a group of artists who thrived on creativity, and even a handful of civilians who simply volunteered because they couldn't stand idly by. They were given minimal training, outfitted with basic equipment, and sent to the Drakhreth's front lines. The world watched in stunned silence as this ragtag group boarded a transport ship, their faces a mixture of determination and uncertainty. The Drakhreth, upon receiving news of Earth's counterattack, were bemused. They expected a final act of defiance, a last-ditch effort that would end in spectacular failure. But when they saw the humans stepping off the transport, they were struck by disbelief. These weren't soldiers. There was no polished armor, no synchronized movements, no intimidating presence. Instead, they were greeted by individuals who appeared unarmed, calm, and, most baffling of all, friendly. The leader of the Drakhreth invasion force, General Tharnak, observed the humans from the command center of his ship. He couldn't comprehend their strategy. Where was the battle formation? Where were the weapons? He ordered his troops to stand down, considering this a pathetic attempt at negotiation. "Let them grovel," Tharnak said with a sneer. But the humans didn't grovel. Instead, they began to explore their surroundings, engaging with the Drakhreth in ways that defied logic. One human offered a flower to a bewildered alien soldier. Another began sketching the alien ships, showing the Drakhreth guards the intricate drawings with a smile. The former engineer started examining the alien technology, not to sabotage it, but to understand it. The Drakhreth were unprepared for this approach. They had expected fear, anger, or even defiance, but not curiosity and kindness. Earth's leaders watched anxiously as the reports came in. The weakest soldiers were behaving in ways that defied every military protocol. There were no battles, no direct confrontations. Instead, they were building relationships, sowing confusion, and, most importantly, learning. The aliens, so accustomed to dominating through fear, found themselves unsettled by these humans who seemed immune to intimidation. The Drakreth troops, initially dismissive, began to lower their guard. Some even started to engage with the humans out of curiosity. The teacher shared stories of Earth's history, art, and culture, captivating his alien audience. The artists created murals on the walls of the alien base, depicting scenes of unity and hope. The engineer, while studying the alien tech, offered insights that impressed even the Drakreth scientists. Slowly but surely, the humans were breaking down the barriers between themselves and their enemies. General Tharnak grew increasingly frustrated. This wasn't how wars were supposed to go. He called for an emergency meeting with his top advisors, demanding an explanation for the humans' behavior. "They're weak," he growled. "Why are they not begging for mercy?" But even his advisors couldn't provide a clear answer. The humans' actions defied the Drakreth's understanding of warfare. As days turned into weeks, the Drakreth invasion began to lose momentum. The humans had managed to disrupt the invaders' plans without firing a single shot. They exposed flaws in the Drakreth's rigid command structure, exploited their lack of adaptability, and turned their own psychological warfare against them. What had started as a desperate gamble was quickly becoming humanity's greatest triumph. The world watched in awe as the weakest soldiers continued their mission. They weren't just surviving, they were winning. And in doing so, they were proving that strength wasn't just about physical power or advanced technology. It was about resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding human spirit. The Drakreth had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The initial shock of the humans' unconventional approach began to wear off, but the ripple effects it created within the Drakreth ranks only grew stronger. Soldiers once disciplined to the point of fanaticism now found themselves distracted, curious, and even conflicted. Conversations between humans and aliens became a common sight, an occurrence that would have been unthinkable at the start of the invasion. What had begun as bemusement turned into intrigue, and the seeds of doubt in the Drakreth's superiority started to take root. One of the most striking examples of this shift occurred in the lower ranks of the Drakreth army. These soldiers, bred and conditioned to see their enemies as inferior, began to realize that humanity was not what they had been taught to expect. The humans weren't primitive savages incapable of understanding. They were something far more dangerous. They were adaptable. Some soldiers who had interacted closely with the humans started questioning their orders. If the humans could be so engaging, so relatable, why had they been branded as enemies in the first place? The Drakreth leadership, especially General Tharnak, struggled to maintain control as morale within their ranks began to falter. The reports coming from the front lines were perplexing. Soldiers were openly discussing their interactions with the humans, sharing tales of human ingenuity and creativity. Some even admired the humans' ability to find beauty and hope in the direst of circumstances. These weren't just isolated incidents. They were becoming a movement, a quiet rebellion within the Drakreth army. Back on Earth, humanity's leaders were cautiously optimistic. The unorthodox plan was yielding results far beyond their expectations. Intelligence reports indicated that the Drakreth forces were no longer operating as a cohesive unit. Their once unstoppable war machine was beginning to stutter. Earth's unconventional soldiers, by simply being themselves, were accomplishing what no weapon ever could. They were dismantling the enemy from within. Among the human delegation, there was no sense of triumphalism. They weren't gloating or trying to exploit the Drakreth's confusion. Instead, they doubled down on their efforts to understand and connect. The teacher introduced the Drakreth to human music, playing melodies that resonated even with alien ears. The artists created sculptures and paintings that depicted not just humanity's struggles, but also its aspirations and dreams. The engineer continued to collaborate with curious Drakreth scientists, bridging the gap between two vastly different technologies. As these interactions deepened, a surprising truth emerged. The Drakreth were not as monolithic or invincible as they seemed. Beneath their imposing exterior lay individuals who had their own doubts, fears, and desires. Many of them had joined the military out of necessity, not choice. The humans' relentless positivity and openness began to draw these hidden vulnerabilities to the surface. General Tharnak, however, was far from ready to concede. He viewed these developments as a threat to the Drakretha's dominance and ordered a crackdown on any soldier who displayed weakness by engaging with the humans. Punishments were severe, but they only served to deepen the growing divide within the ranks. Soldiers who had once blindly followed orders began to resist, their loyalty eroded by what they had seen and experienced. Meanwhile, the humans' actions were having another, more profound effect on the civilians of the Drakreth Empire. Word of Earth's weakest soldiers and their unexpected impact spread like wildfire. The Drakreth had subjugated countless worlds, leaving trails of despair and resentment in their wake. But now, those same worlds were hearing about humans who stood up not with weapons, but with ideas and compassion. The message was clear. Resistance didn't have to come in the form of brute force. It could come through unity and understanding. This growing unrest among the subjugated populations added another layer of complexity to the Drakretha's predicament. They were no longer just fighting humans. They were fighting a narrative, a story of resilience that was inspiring rebellion across their empire. The humans had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest spark could ignite a flame. Tharnak's frustration turned into desperation. His attempts to crush the human delegation failed spectacularly. When he ordered an aggressive strike against one of the humans' camps, the response from his own soldiers was tepid at best. Many refused to carry out the order, citing their own interactions with the humans as justification. Those who did attack found themselves outmaneuvered, not by superior firepower, but by the humans' resourcefulness. The attackers were captured, treated with dignity, and then released, further deepening the cracks in the Drakretha's morale. The humans' approach was deliberate and consistent. They didn't just want to survive. They wanted to change the narrative of the war. By treating the Drakreth with respect and kindness, they exposed the hollowness of the Empire's ideology. They showed that strength wasn't just about conquest. It was about resilience, creativity, and the ability to build bridges instead of walls. As the days passed, the tide of the conflict began to turn. The Drakretha's invasion, which had started with such overwhelming force, was now mired in confusion and dissent. The humans' unyielding spirit had transformed what seemed like an inevitable defeat into a battle of wills. And in this battle, humanity was proving to be far stronger than anyone had anticipated. The weakest soldiers had become Earth's greatest weapon, not through violence, but through the power of their humanity. The Drakreth command structure was unraveling. The once feared conquerors, who had crushed entire civilizations with brute force, now faced an enemy they couldn't comprehend. Human resilience wasn't just about survival. It was about adaptation, about turning weaknesses into strengths. What the Drakreth had dismissed as irrelevant traits, creativity, humor, kindness, were now proving to be the most effective weapons against them. General Tharnak's frustration grew into paranoia. He ordered loyalty tests, interrogations, and mass punishments for any soldier caught fraternizing with humans. But it was too late. The damage had been done. His troops had seen something they were never supposed to see, an alternative. A different way to exist beyond endless conquest. The cracks in their loyalty widened as more soldiers hesitated before carrying out orders, questioning what they had been taught. The human delegation continued their approach with unwavering patience. They never directly incited rebellion, never made demands. They simply kept being human, asking questions, sharing stories, and showing kindness where none was expected. They had no need to attack the Drakreth physically because the real battle was taking place in the minds of the invaders. One particular moment turned the tide even further. A Drakreth officer, once fiercely loyal to the Empire, hesitated when given an order to execute a captured human. The human, a former therapist, didn't beg for their life. Instead, they asked the officer a simple question. Why do you fight? It wasn't an accusation, just a genuine curiosity. The officer found themselves unable to answer. They had been raised to believe in conquest, but standing there, face to face with a prisoner who showed no fear, who sought understanding rather than vengeance, the officer realized they had no personal reason for this war. The hesitation spread like wildfire. More and more Drakreth soldiers started defecting, not out of cowardice, but because they no longer believed in the Empire's cause. Some fled, while others secretly aided the humans, passing along information and sabotaging their own forces in small but significant ways. It was a war being won not through force, but through sheer ideological collapse. The Drakreth leadership, desperate to regain control, resorted to their final option: total destruction. If they couldn't conquer Earth, they would annihilate it. Tharnak ordered the deployment of a planet-destroying weapon, one designed to reduce entire worlds to ash. He justified it as a necessity, a warning to any other species that might think of resisting in the future. If humanity couldn't be subjugated, it would be erased. But even this order did not go as planned. The Drakreth fleet was in disarray. Officers argued, soldiers hesitated, and key personnel abandoned their posts. Some even actively worked against their own fleet, disabling key systems and feeding critical intelligence to the humans. What should have been a swift and devastating execution turned into a chaotic struggle among the Drakreth themselves. Humanity didn't sit idly by during this internal collapse. The weakest soldiers, dismissed as irrelevant at the beginning of the war, were now at the center of the conflict's resolution. The engineer and the Drakreth defectors worked together to disable the weapon's firing mechanism. The teacher delivered an impassioned speech, broadcast across the fleet, about the nature of strength and the cost of endless war. The artist painted a massive mural on the walls of a Drakreth command station, depicting a future where their two species coexisted rather than destroyed one another. The final blow didn't come from a battle, but from the realization that the war had already been lost, not for humanity, but for the Drakreth. Their empire, built on fear, was crumbling under the weight of doubt. Their soldiers no longer believed. Their leadership was fractured, and their enemies had won not by fighting harder, but by refusing to become monsters themselves. General Tharnak stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the chaos unfolding before him. His once mighty fleet was in shambles, not from enemy fire, but from within. His soldiers refused to obey, his officers hesitated, and his empire's authority crumbled with each passing moment. The humans had done the impossible, not through superior firepower, but through something he never could have anticipated. They had turned his own forces against him without ever lifting a weapon. He slammed his fist against the control panel, demanding answers. Reports flooded in. Key systems had been sabotaged, supply lines were disrupted, and entire battalions had abandoned their posts. Defectors were openly aiding the humans, some even choosing to stay on Earth rather than return to the fleet. Tharnak had underestimated them. He had expected resistance, expected desperate last stands, expected to crush their spirits with overwhelming force. But what he had never expected, what he could never have planned for, was for his own soldiers to question the very purpose of their war. The final order came through, a last-ditch effort to salvage what remained of the invasion. The fleet was to retreat. It was a command laced with bitterness, an admission of failure that Tharnak could barely force himself to give. The Drakreth ships turned away from Earth, breaking formation, no longer a unified armada but a scattered collection of remnants. Some left willingly, eager to distance themselves from the war. Others hesitated, still struggling with the reality that they had been defeated not by force, but by humanity's sheer refusal to break. Back on the surface, the humans watched as the invaders fled. There was no celebration, no triumphant cheers. They had won, but not in the way wars were usually won. The weakest soldiers, the ones dismissed as irrelevant, had turned the tide of an interstellar invasion. Their kindness had been their greatest strength. Their ability to connect, to question, to challenge without violence had proven more effective than any weapon ever could. The aftermath of the war was not one of rebuilding ruins left by destruction, but one of repairing the damage left by fear. Some Drakreth chose to stay behind, too ashamed to return to an empire they no longer believed in. They learned from the humans, integrated into society, and in time became part of Earth's story. Other species, long oppressed by the Drakreth, heard of what had happened. Rebellions ignited across the empire, not in the name of war, but in the pursuit of something greater: freedom, understanding, and the belief that there was a better way to exist. The invasion of Earth became a legend, not just among humans, but across the stars. Not because of a great battle, but because of what it proved. That strength was not measured by brutality. That victory was not always claimed by force. And that sometimes the greatest warriors were not the strongest, but the ones who refused to become the monsters they fought against.